Hey y'all, you made it to the other side. You made it to the other channel. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. This is Caress and the City. And if y'all are into the spiritual entities and psychic readings and all that good stuff, make sure you follow Seven Heaven, my other channel. But I'm so stoked because this is the channel dedicated to probably my favorite show of all time, y'all. I've always loved Sex and the City, and we're gonna start right away. Season 1, Episode 1, y'all. So good. This aired on June 6th, 1998. And of course, it's called Sex and the City, based on Candace Bushnell's column in the 90s. And it was turned into a book and then turned into the show. I'm sure if you're here, you're at least familiar with it a bit, but the episode is, of course, titled Sex and the City, like the book and the column. And of course, y'all, as soon as you hear that little theme song, you know everything's gonna be okay. I don't know, is it like a little cha-cha or something? I just know everything's gonna be okay. So we open up on Elizabeth, and of course we have Carrie narrating in the earlier, well, I guess she narrates through the whole series, but they have the little cutaways to camera. I'm just looking at my little notes, y'all. But they have the cutaways to camera through the whole, like, first 2 seasons, I think, on people's interviews. And Carrie narrates. So we have this English girl, Elizabeth. Obviously, she's gorge. We're gonna have to explore some of her outfits because, they're just super posh. And she's an English journalist that moves to Manhattan, as one does. And she meets this man, Tom, who's 42. Now, we won't hear from Elizabeth again, but Carrie's narrating all this for us. So Tom is a 42-year-old eligible bachelor, banker or something, of course, as they all are. And she's apparently he's making $2 million a year, Carrie says. And they met at a gallery opening. They did the whole like, oh, do I know you? Do we know each other? Type of thing. And in 2 weeks, they spend the next 2 weeks going on dates and, playing footsie under the table and stuff with the little cloth. And they cut to a screen. I think it's blue or like a silhouette of them having sex. And I have to say, it's probably better than some of the sex that we see on the show. Of course, can't have Sex in the City without the sex. But I don't know. I guess I don't even know that it's more genuine, more intimate, because some of the sex we see later on gets like a little more cartoony. But yeah, they're looking at houses together, and then the real estate person asks them, oh, do you guys have kids? And he, sly dog that he is, Tom, says, not yet, and like wraps his arm around Elizabeth's waist. So he's got the moves, obviously, as an eligible bachelor is apt to do. So then he kind of talks about like, oh, do you want to meet my parents next week? And she's like, yeah, I do. And then he cancels because his mom is sick, and then she's like, okay, I understand, and then he never calls her back. And then we cut to Elizabeth at lunch with Carrie, which we only see the back of Sarah Jessica Parker's little bob, and I swear, you guys, you don't even know how much fun you're getting into, especially if you've never watched the show, and the adventure you're about to go on with those little curls and beyond. But she has her cigarette, which is like, one of the things that has aged worse in the show is the constant smoking indoors and just all the smoking. Trash it. But Carrie and Elizabeth are now in their scene together. And Elizabeth's like, in England, looking at houses together would have meant something. And Carrie's narrating, oh, she doesn't know it's the age of uninnocence. Nobody has breakfast at Tiffany's, and instead we have... and no one has affairs to remember. Instead, we have breakfast at, I don't know what she says, breakfast at 8 a.m. and affairs we want to forget or something. Carrie always has her little quips. And she's talking about like the age of single women in Manhattan and how they travel and they pay taxes and they buy $400 Manolo Blahniks and they're alone. And this, of course, was like one of the first eras of single women of that stature, because technically in the US, I'm pretty sure women couldn't have bank accounts until like the 70s. So this really was new. Of course, in today's day and age, we take that for granted, but it really was a first era of women who were like raised by women who did not have those options, and they were on their own with their own money and doing things more for their pleasure for the first time. And so Carrie, of course, the sex columnist that she is, she's interviewing different people. And even though we see her continue her work as a sex columnist throughout the whole show, it's the beginning of the show that they do the interview style talking head cutaways, which I personally, it's one of my favorite things about the whole series because they're just so fucking ridiculous. Like, they're so stupid. And they're so, like, I like it because these people, I mean, 90s HBO was like, probably the realest TV had gotten up to that point because it wasn't so overly produced, even though it was a good quality. But like these, more or less, the actors still looked like a good looking version of real people, not just like movie stars. So you see all these guys, for some reason she's talking to everyone in the gym, and you see all these like sweaty, hairy dudes. And one of them's talking about the mid-30s power flip, which I would like to see in the comments if y'all think this is true. But he talks about how, like, oh yeah, when you're young, like, women control everything, women control the sex, but in the 30s, because women want to settle down, then men hold all the cards because we're the ones who are deciding if we want to marry you. And, you know, if you want to have kids, some other guy's talking about, like, oh, well, if you want to have kids, you don't want to have kids with a woman in her mid-30s, because then you got to start right away and all this stuff. So these guys are talking about how, like, because they're earning money and because women are ready to get like serious, they have all the power. And then Miranda, with her little Vidal Sassoon cut, is in the lunch line. And she talks about, what does she even talk about? How it's like a cautionary tale for women dating in the city or whatever. And then Charlotte, looking like a full-on teacher in the classroom, is like, well, men are intimidated by strong, accomplished women, whatever. And so if you want to get married, you got to play by the rules. And she's wearing her little glasses. She looks so cute. And then, of course, we have Skipper in his perm, and he's just talking about, like, women. I love them. I can't get enough of them. Whatever. And I'm pretty sure he's a computer programmer, which is so funny because I feel like that's such a common job now, but being a computer programmer back then obviously meant something a little different. But I'm sure now, if you jump to like, oh, Skipper and just like that, he'd be like a multimillionaire because he got in early on like the tech game. And okay, so another guy's talking about how the women should just marry like the short, fat, poor guys because they'll be more grateful for you. He doesn't really go into why, but then they cut to Miranda and she's like, you know, I've dated the short, fat, poor ones and they're just as selfish as the other ones. Like, and I swear in my notes, I just have short, fat, and poor written out, which is like, oh my God. And it's interesting. I'm also interested to hear from y'all in the comments if you really think that, like, if you, and I mean, it doesn't have to be gender-based, but, like, if you feel like you've settled for someone, because short, fat, poor, that's a mess. We won't say that, but if you feel like you're settling for somebody, let's say, then do you feel like you were treated better or no? Because and I think that's a very interesting argument. And we'll get more into depth with some of these topics, but this is just episode 1, season 1, episode 1, part 1. We'll do different analysis on different topics later. But we cut to drag queens bringing Miranda her 30-something birthday cake. And it's so fun. I think they're at like a Thai restaurant or something. And Carrie's like, oh, it was a 30-something birthday party and we would have all rather had a celebratory conference call. And that's one of the lines that I feel like does not age very well because these girls live to go out with each other. They live to run up a bill at brunch and they live to just be like talking tea over like coffee, drinks, whatever. So I don't know that that's true, but I think she was just trying to get at like, oh, another year old or whatever, because people, I guess there's always kind of an age obsession, but I feel like even then it might have been like a little bit more. But the drag queens bring Miranda her cake, and then Samantha says, if you're a 30-something woman dating in the city, you can bang your head against the wall trying to find a relationship, or you can say screw it and have sex like a man. And then Charlotte's like, you mean with dildos? And then Samantha's like, no, without feeling. And then I think it was... Oh, who was it? Carrie, Samantha? Somebody's talking about Drew, the sex god. And, yeah, they're talking about how, like, oh, no, I think it was Miranda. Somebody slept with Drew, the sex god. And they say, oh, well, yeah, the sex was great. But he like wanted so much more from me. And then Miranda goes into like, oh, well, men in this city fail on both counts. I think it was Samantha who slept with Drew, the sex god. Sorry, Drew, which I mean, wouldn't you want that to be your nickname? Like, they give out some pretty foul nicknames in the show, but I will say that Drew the sex god is probably among the more flattering ones. So Miranda says that men in the city fail on both counts because if they don't want a relationship, but then if you just want to have sex with them, they don't like that so much either. And then she talks about Jeremiah the poet and how the sex was crazy, but then he wanted to chat, and she was like over that, I guess. And so, yeah. And then Carrie talks about how, oh, well, if you guys find the right guy, then you'll be over that, which I think is another interesting thing because it's so individual and it has to do with the time of someone's life. And I mean, I'm a love believer, abso-fucking-lutely. And I think that there is like a right person, but I think it's also just a matter of luck as well. But Samantha says that the right guy is an illusion and that, just like have your fun. And she talks about The Last Seduction, which Charlotte says she hates the movie. Samantha says she loves the movie. So we see the first bit of like the Charlotte-Samantha dichotomy because they tend to disagree, which makes it fun when they do agree. But they talk about The Last Seduction and the fucking against the chain link fence and how the protagonist in that movie never comes to a realization of like, what have I done? Or like, I shouldn't behave that way. So that was part of what inspired them. Because I mean, these girls didn't have a Sex in the City. So when they reference things, it's interesting because the Last Seduction was that for them. And so, yeah, I want to do a little movie review on The Last Seduction, so we're going to do that. But then we have Carrie and Stanford out to lunch together. Oh, the beginning of one of the best relationships in the show, in my opinion. So Stanford claims that straight love is closeted now in Manhattan. And he's a talent agent only with one client, Carrie's gay bestie, which sometimes goes into the trope territory, but sometimes we see her treat him like a full human. And his one client has a billboard in Times Square. And while they're out to lunch, they see the very own Kurt Herrington. Now, Kurt Herrington, it sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like someone's old boyfriend who went to Harvard and wears like a sweater vest, but he just has like that typical like 90s Y2K boy hair, spiky, whatever. And Carrie describes him as a mistake she made when she was 26 and 29 and 31. And haven't we all? We've all had someone that kind of slipped through the cracks in different eras when perhaps they shouldn't. So I find that super funny. But she also describes him as a self-centered, withholding creep. That is so funny. A self-centered, withholding creep who's the best sex she's ever had in her life. Like, how funny. I feel like if you're actually using the word creep to describe a guy, which of course probably meant something a lot different in 98 than it means now, like they were on that Beavis and Butthead looking ass vernacular. But calling someone a creep that you've slept with is either gonna be the worst sex, like literally me too, or the best sex you've ever had, probably. That's just me guessing. Yeah. Um, yeah, calling someone a creep is so funny. So she walks over to him and he's like, "Hey, babe," because duh, he calls her babe. And Stanford is like he's doing the wait till we get home eyes to Carrie. And of course they're smoking inside because it's the 90s and they didn't care about lung cancer then. And yeah, she's like, "Oh, well, are you seeing anyone special?" And then he's like, "Nah, not really. What about you?" And she's like, "A couple guys." And it's like, why don't you just take out a gun and shoot everyone you're dating because they're so damn unspecial to you? Like, just dunk on them so hard. So we cut to them like getting out of there and going in bed together. And then Sarah Jessica Parker is writhing with her boobies covered because, as she does, I don't think we see everyone else's boobs in the show, and as far as the four main characters, but we never see SJP's. So if you're watching Sex and the City to see SJ titties, you will not. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if it happens in Just Like That either. And I think that plays later into some of the drama with the actresses about pay and like their equal kind of status. But yeah, I mean, fun fact, you're just not gonna see Sarah Jessica Parker's boobs. Too bad. So SJP's riding with her titties covered, and Kurt is presumably giving her head. He's under the sheet. He pops up, kind of wipes his mouth, and he's like, "My turn." So Carrie says she's going back to work, and obviously he looks not happy. So Carrie leaves, and now she feels on top of the world. She feels untouchable because she just had sex like a man, and it's the 90s. Who can stop us? And she was like, "No one can get in my way." And then she's like so feeling herself when someone bumps into her, and then her little 90s clutch spills open with all her little 90s makeup. And she's picking up her stuff off the ground, and we see like a blush brush, we see mascara, a lip gloss, and then we see like condoms. Just like, that's all she had in her bag, because she's a 90s modern gal, right? And so this hot banker helps her, starts picking up her stuff, and he looks at the condoms puzzled, like, "Oh, she's down to fuck." And she has that giggly, "Yeah, I am," like energy. And she says she notices that he's handsome, has no ring, and he noted that she keeps ultra textured Trojans with a reservoir tip. That's the tongue twister of the day, everybody. Ultra textured Trojans with a reservoir tip. Before you're going on stage, ultra textured Trojans with a reservoir tip. Just say that to yourself. And she's like, "Thanks," and like takes the condoms from him, and he's like, "Anytime." And oh no, that's not the first time we'll see good old Chris Noth with them brows and that no good look. But we see Carrie walk away, and then she turns around to look at Big again, and then he like waves and like kind of does his brows, and then she turns around and like fixes her skirt again. And like literally, like, I don't know, like she was still somehow a mess from just having sex or something. And then that's where we're gonna stop for this little part one. I mean, season 1, episode 1 is so good, and it hits on so many notes. It's very thorough. So we're gonna stop it right there. But I want to know y'all's thoughts in the comments about the mid-30s power flip. Do you actually think it's possible for women to have sex like a man? Which, whatever that means. Now, of course, we don't rely on such rigid gender lines and stuff. But I mean, my opinion, I don't think there's such a thing as consequence-free sex, because, of course, we have babies, we have diseases, we have many things. Energetic connection, if not emotional. So I don't really believe there's such a thing as consequence-free, because you can lay one down one time and you can be committed to someone for life. or have something that never goes away. So I think that that's largely a myth that we see now in dating app world. But that's so much what this first episode is about, and we'll get into that in the part 2 as well. But I think it's an interesting sentiment, and I think it's like something that's exciting to watch them explore. But I think that's even something they run into a little more in the second half of the episode, is that like even consequence-free sex is not that consequence-free. Now y'all will learn to know and love the man, the banker she ran into, Mr. Big. Yeah, he's a staple. He's the topic of conversation for many a Sex and the City thread on the subreddit, and he represents a lot of important things. But I think it's interesting that they just meet right after she ends up hooking up with somebody and the condoms fall out of her purse, because it will reflect so much more of how he'll treat her later on. And what else? What do you guys think about what Charlotte said, where, oh, men are intimidated by women, by successful women, so play by the rules, versus Samantha's like, just enjoy yourself. Is there like a girl that you agree with the most? Yeah. I would give this, well, we can use a Manolo rating system out of 5 for each halves of the episodes, because I mean, if we're analyzing them and we're doing a summary, I think it's cool to kind of take it by half of an episode so we can be thorough without making too long of a video. But I would give the first half of the episode 4 Manolos, because it's like, it's on and popping. You don't even know what you're about to get with this. Like, literally one of the best shows ever. So much more. I love where every character starts and how we can see them right from the beginning where they're gonna end up. And I'm really excited to do part 2, y'all. So thanks so much for watching. Comment, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And me and Samantha will see you next time. Bye, y'all.